Today, America is a global superpower, with dominant industry and infrastructure that stretches coast to coast. But America wasn't always the industrial and powerful nation that we know today. Before prosperity came the drive for expansion and industrialization, a drive that was made possible by the exploits of two men and a group of dedicated explorers. Lewis and Clark's expedition of the West conquered frontiers in terrain, technology, and culture to open up the West to American settlement, which created new economic opportunities, produced an industrial and scientific revolution, and spurred the decline of Native American society, while opening up a new ideological frontier. The year is 1803. The fledgling United States of America has declared independence from Britain only 27 years ago. Thomas Jefferson, a Democrat, is in office, and he is dedicated to restoring America to a small, state-governed republic of farmers. He calls his election a revolution. But a conflict an ocean away presents an enormous opportunity that upends Jefferson's vision and changes the fabric of the United States. To finance his ambitious series of wars that brought him close to conquering Europe, Napoleon was brought to the negotiation table to sell off France's overseas colonies. Jefferson seized the opportunity to seek New Orleans, which would provide the U.S. with a port to service international and domestic trade. He asked for a city, but ends up with the entire Louisiana Territory. Painfully little is known about the land that lies west of the Mississippi. Until Alexander Mackenzie in 1797, no European had reached the Pacific overland. Anthony Henday is turned back by the Rockies, and Samuel Hearn by the Sierra Nevada. This lack of information presents a critical problem for the United States. The political climate of the 19th century is tense, and Jefferson needs to solidify his new territory. The British continued to harass the United States on land and sea, impressing sailors and forging critical alliances through continued fur trade in the Great Lakes. Meanwhile, economic conditions at home spelled out a dangerous need for expansion. The newfound commercial and industrial economy needs raw materials, and the farmland of the Northeast is becoming increasingly overexhausted. Even before the Louisiana Purchase, Jefferson envisions finding the elusive Northwest Passage. To realize these ambitions, he chooses Meriwether Lewis, a fellow Virginian, and his personal secretary, who is early involved in putting down the Whiskey Rebellion. He selects William Clark, a lieutenant under George Washington, to accompany him. Preparations for the exploration begin immediately. The two scramble to study medicine, botany, zoology, buy supplies from Harper's Ferry, and found the corpse of discovery. This collection of single, healthy young men with adequate survival skills faces an iron hand from Lewis and Clark as a strict regime of discipline is enacted to ensure the expedition's success. Lewis and Clark are tasked with four main objectives: establishing American sovereignty over the new territory, finding and mapping the source of the Missouri River and a passage to the Pacific, establishing diplomatic and economic relations with Native American tribes, and making observations about flora and fauna. The Proclamation of 1763 had prevented farther American settlement in the lands west of the Appalachians. But with declining British presence and internal decline among powerful native groups like the Iroquois Confederacy, contact has been increasing between Europeans and Native Americans. However, Lewis and Clark had to conquer a frontier in information and culture. They knew almost nothing of what they faced. Despite this, Lewis and Clark developed a protocol with interactions with Native Americans. They exchanged goods and gifts, and the expedition presented the tribes with a Jefferson Indian Peace Medal. They were able to establish sovereignty over the land, while offering the tribes protection in exchange for compliance. The enormity of the frontiers in terrain, technology, and transportation the Corps will have to encounter becomes apparent. The keel boats, dugout boats, and ironclad boats used to traverse the Missouri River provided for slow, arduous going. Breaks in the river meant grueling portages. To make matters worse, they are faced with the constant threat of disease. In August, they held successful summits with the Oho near Council Bluffs and the Yankton Swee near South Dakota. For the expedition, winters meant staying put as the cold represented a real threat to safety. The first winter at Fort Mandan with the friendly Mandan Indians exemplifies the role Native Americans played in the exploration's success. At the fort, a pregnant Sacagawea joined the expedition. She would serve as an invaluable guide and translator throughout the exploration. As the Corps of Discovery neared the Continental Divide, they sent a keel boat loaded with botanical samples, maps, and reports back to St. Louis. On the Lemhi Pass, in one of the most decisive moments of the expedition, Sacagawea helped purchase horses from the Shoshone, and got guides would help the group through the arduous Lolo Pass over the Bitterroot Mountains. This began the harshest conditions of the journey. The party suffered from frostbite, dehydration, hunger, bad weather, and exhaustion. Remarkably, they lost no one. After recovering at a Nez Perce village, the explorers finally found the Pacific Ocean. It was a triumphant event. Encounters with Native Americans weren't always amicable. The Lakota and South Dakota had already established commercial ties with the British. Tensions nearly erupted in violence, if not for Chief Black Buffalo's diplomacy. Many natives expressed open hostility towards the exploration. But overall, in the short term, the exploration was a roaring success. Despite the challenges, Lewis and Clark only lost one man. While they did not find a water route to the Pacific, Lewis and Clark found the source of the Missouri and laid a route over the Sierras. This almost immediately resulted in a dramatic increase in Western settlement, with the eventual establishment of the Oregon and California trails, which overflowed with 49ers and people looking to establish homesteads. It provided the most sophisticated and extensive map system of the West to date, which paved the way for future explorations like those of John C. Fremont and Joseph Rutherford Walker. Maps made by William Clark were published in 1810 and 1814, which remained the most accurate navigational sources until the 1840s. This was the map that Lewis and Clark used for the exploration. And this is the map created after the exploration, showing the exponential increase in knowledge about the West that the expedition created. The expedition succeeded in establishing diplomatic relations with numerous Native American tribes, promoting temporary peace and understanding, which produced mutual relationships in the very early years of Western expansion. Additionally, the exploration directly improved Native American fur trade by establishing extensive networks of Native American tribes in the West. They exchanged goods like knives, beads, and other items for furs with the Shoshone, Nez Perce, and Hidatsa. This opened up new markets for American and European fur traders. The problem of transportation to the new Western Territory was the driving force behind the American Industrial Revolution. Canals, railroad technology, and the telegraph were largely developed in the West to service this need. These innovations spurred a dramatic rise of the factory system, with ideas like Frederick Winslow Taylor's scientific management and technology like Henry Ford's assembly line. The most striking development in transportation was the Transcontinental Railroad, which made the West accessible to anyone. Western expansion resulted in massive economic opportunity, creating a moral and economic place for anyone to start over. The mining industry created jobs for poor industrial laborers and Chinese immigrants, while the Homestead Act of 1862 allowed families to accumulate cheap land in the West where they practiced subsistence agriculture. These factors were important in producing excitement and curiosity about the American West, as well as producing a romanticization in pop culture. But the expedition had disastrous long-term effects on Native Americans. The dramatic American settlement of the West decimated Plains Indian population and way of life by introducing diseases that wiped out exponential amounts of people, such as smallpox, influenza, cholera. Also, settlers nearly eliminated the buffalo population, dropping it from 30 million to less than 1,000 due to commercial buffalo hunting that branched off the Transcontinental Railroad. The buffalo was not only a source of livelihood and economic viability, it was a spiritual symbol for the Plains Indians, and its destruction created a universal feeling of depression among them. The clash of cultures resulted in wars both physically and ideologically. The Reservation Plan and the Dawes Act personified attempts by the U.S. government to assimilate Native Americans into white culture and produce systematic social and political subjugation. The early diplomatic successes that Lewis and Clark enjoyed were quickly replaced by brutal conflict along the western frontier between Native Americans and settlers. Massacres like at Wounded Knee characterized these conflicts as settlers invoked extreme atrocities. While the West brought great benefits for America, the settlement of the new territory created enduring problems. It produced territorial disputes, which manifested in several conflicts: the Spanish-American War over annexing Texas to serve as Manifest Destiny, and disputes with European nations, like the 42-40 fight episode with the British over the Washington Territory. Most importantly, expansion created a sectional conflict about what to do with the new land. This produced legislation like the Missouri Compromise, the Compromise of 1850, and the Kansas-Nebraska Act. These all dealt with the enduring problem of if slavery should be allowed on the new lands. This eventually erupted into the Civil War. Was conquering the western frontier a distinguishable achievement that laid the groundwork for American expansion? Or was it a road to the extension of a system that destroyed Native American culture? The answer is, it was both.